Authenticity. Bringing your full self to work. We speak about its importance all the time, but how often do we really feel like we could do it? It's a hard ask. And it's understandable. We want to show our best selves, and it takes time to know if this room is safe and okay for me to fully show up. We want to be our 100% true selves, but we also want to respectfully blend in and hear how this room and community work and engage before we do so. What's the right balance of being respectful to the environment versus feeling like I can't show who I am because of the environment? Today, we want to navigate all those questions as we think about how we bring our full selves to work. Hi, I'm Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox and the host of this podcast, Dear Workplace.
I always felt like I was choosing. And in my mind, it was always, who am I going to disappoint today, right? And I know that's such a glass half empty way of thinking about it, but that's how I lived for quite some time. And I think when I was an entrepreneur, I realized actually you have choices and you can create opportunity in most cases. Not everyone can do that, but when you're privileged to do so, I encourage people to take advantage of that.
I think that, for me, I was coming from a place of no. And the most important thing at that job is that I was saying no to what I wanted. And now being in a space where I think that everything is possible for me doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It's definitely not.
As someone who navigated multiple industries in her career, this is a question I often wondered. Even among friends, it takes time to really get to know who they are. We build better trust and understanding of one another through more time and experiences together. And honestly, half of the time, we're also learning how to understand ourselves better too. I'm eager for today's topic because at InnovatorsBox, we provide lots of training, consultation, and coaching to build a happy creative culture. I asked myself, how can I balance how much I show up authentically as myself, and how can I shape a team that feels like they can bring their full selves? The truth is, this is not an overnight journey. Even if one leader is caring, every individual is engaging with multiple stakeholders, and our experience at work is shaped from all those experiences. Sometimes, we are in offices where we don't have supportive leaders or systems that empower us. Do we then simply leave, or is there something we could do about it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, oh my gosh, it's such a great, I love that question. I'm going to go back a little bit further.
Meet Mike Canter in North Carolina. He is the former Senior Associate Dean Students and Academic Operations at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. We had the opportunity to work together briefly when he invited me to keynote speak at one of the Georgetown's Career Service Day a few years ago. I was inspired even back then by the deep care he had for students and how he took the time to listen and connect the dots. He's been at Georgetown for over a decade and has now transitioned. He shares a bit more about why he wished he could do more, even while he loved his work. Something I feel many may resonate when we think about all of our different identities when we come to work. Can I share all of who I really am?
Many people had a very dysfunctional upbringing, to put it very politely. And I think that, I am a proud gay man and, coming from a small town, it's a cliched story for a reason, right? I was really taught to be pushed into a box instead of blowing the box up. And for me, I think that over the course of my life, and I think where I am now, a lot of things that I did were sometimes driven with this shame, right? And everyone talks about the creativity and kind of finding your voice, but there is a dark underbelly to that too. It's that finding that bravery and kind of removing the shame of being your authentic self. And it's not just about, being a gay man, but I think that it's more about internally who I am as a human. There were many times when I look back, as I'm sure many people do, of whether it's my parents or the community or neighborhood kids that really tried to diminish my sparkle or what makes me me. And I think that, I'm 42 now, and I'm at a space where I stop apologizing for that. And I think that the key moment in my life happened at Georgetown, where I brought that shame with me to Georgetown so many years ago. Difficult familial relationships that are non existent now, making the choices to kind of better myself and live the life that I wanted to. But it doesn't go away, right? I joined Georgetown to give back, but there's also that dark underbelly there too of that I wanted to try to really fit this mold. The blazer, the blue and gray, this whole thing, I really wanted to buy into it when I never quite fit that. And I think that it was really experimenting and finding who I was as a leader, as a manager, as a colleague, as an educator, watching my bosses. Have been really fortunate to work for some very dynamic women in my career. And I think that really over time, instead of, people would ask me at the table, and this was probably something shifted for me. And I don't know if it's, the relationship with my husband, of getting married. I don't know if it's breaking off of the familial relationships, which was a really difficult choice, but it was a choice for my happiness. And for me, I'm in a space where I refuse to be anything other than authentically me. That's gay, that's country music, that's camo hat, that's loving wallpaper, that's all of it into one really messy space. And that's me.
Fully me indeed. I hear what Mike shares here. As a Korean American who worked in nuclear weapon security and now in innovation and people development, I'm constantly one of the few. And at the beginning, it felt a bit tough to balance how much of who I am would I share with who. Even if you have supportive colleagues and managers, it takes a whole level of courage, self-awareness, and intentionality to show up fully as our full selves as a human being. Yes, not everyone may always see you or appreciate you for who you are, and to be okay with that takes intentionality.
When I started to bring that into the workplace, there are hits or misses, right? I'm bringing who I am into a more traditional space. It took some adjustments for me and to kind of gain my sea legs. And I think that for me, I remember that there was a colleague that questioned me after a meeting. In my life, as you know, I was in nonstop meetings, whether it was meeting with students or other things. So it was just before death by Zoom was a thing, it was in person. And I remember a colleague, and this was really early on, asked me to stay behind in a meeting and said to me, "I can't believe what you did." And I thought, "What are you talking about?" They were like, "You openly talked about your husband. You openly talked about that you come from a family that is filled with convicts, that, growing up, and it was a meeting about administration and those kinds of things, where it was a space where I was bringing it up that, I grew up going to penitentiaries for holidays. This was a part of my truth." And I remember him looking at me, and that's when he came out and said, "I didn't realize that I could do that," or "I didn't realize that maybe something wasn't clicking for me." And I said, "Things didn't always click for me, and it's still rough. You're going to have people at the table that are not going to accept you. But it's actually the people that matter are those that need to hear that voice, and that nothing about my background, nothing that I've experienced, it's not a sob story. It's just my authentic truth. I'm not asking for the I'm sorries. I'm not asking for the full understanding. I speak my truth because I have to, because it's in my heart and it's in my mind. And it's also to hopefully empower other people to be authentically real and take the risk. And if that workplace can't handle it, then you need to find a new one. I was fortunate enough that my workplace was able to do that. I think they appreciated, hopefully, if they're listening, appreciated who I was, high energy, in your face about every aspect of my life. Personal, professional, it's all like one big modern painting, right? A big messy splotches of color, beauty, and pain, all of it together.
Speak your truth for the people that matter. Wow, thank you, Mike, for your vulnerability, courage, and speaking your truth. This means a lot. How often have we hesitated to share a glimpse of who we really are when we are at work, social settings, or any setting in fear of how others may judge or see us as? This is one of the reasons why I feel the great resignation period we are experiencing in the midst of the pandemic is so timely. Many people are raising this question. Is this really a workplace where I could speak my truth and be my authentic self? Even if my supervisor says they support me or the company says they value me, do I really feel like I do have that support? I've gone through my journey as well. Would they think I'm too young? Would they think I'm not competent? Would they think that I'm overcompetent? There are so many questions I used to run through my head when I would show up knowing that I'm one of the few or only one. One of the few females. The only Asian. The youngest. And one of the few who formerly was not from government, science, military, or nuclear background. Unlike all of the other colleagues who've been in that realm forever. I didn't have any growing up jokes like everyone else, so I would stay quiet while diligently taking notes and eyeing for opportunities to speak up when I can. I thought about this even more as I built InnovatorsBox and started proactively networking in the business world. It didn't help that even if I wasn't thinking of those lenses, others in the room projected that narrative on me. I even had a moment where someone said to my face, "How can you run your business when you look like this?" That was at my first pitch event. I didn't know what to make out of it other than that I knew how sexist, racist, and ageism that one statement carried. Fortunately, like Mike shared, I sought out and found allies who saw me and heard me. They saw me as a full person with multiple interests, passions, and determination, not because of my age, background, title, or ethnicity. And being intentional about this both as individuals and leaders is even more important because this is how trust is built at work. You have to learn how to see people as who they are and remember that everyone is always different. I asked Kristina Francis, the executive director of JFF Labs at the Jobs for the Future, what she is doing to better support her team in this transitory work environment as someone who is a leader and thinking about generational impacts in the workplace beyond tomorrow.
Ooh, Monica. So I'll share my thoughts on it. I'm still figuring it out. I don't think I have the answers. I, as a leader, sometimes feel ill-equipped to support everyone's individual need and challenge at this time. Because right now, it's not just about what they need for work. It's also what they need for family, what they need for their personal time.
Kristina is a thoughtful powerhouse. This is why whether it was being a principal as one of the few Black and female leaders at Booz Allen Hamilton, or starting her IT consulting firm to implement sustainable workforces at Esteem Logic, to becoming an investor at Pipeline Angels to invest in female entrepreneurs, to being a board member in several organizations such as Civic Starts and Black Girls Ventures. Kristina is someone who goes out of her way to not only stand in her voice, but also inspire others to speak in their truth too. The quote she has on her LinkedIn profile really represents how she lives and serves at work and in life. It's a quote from Warren Buffett. Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Kristina is that tree planter who thinks about future generations and how they will have the shade to enjoy. But it wasn't an easy journey to be where she is today. Let me take you back to her career a bit before we hear her advice about building trust and psychological safety across 5 generations in the hybrid workplace.
I got where I am today through really faith and curiosity. And so when I went to undergrad, I thought I would be a child psychologist. That was what I thought I was going to do and went to school for that. Thought that I would work for a year and then go back and get my PhD, right? So once I graduated undergrad, so the job that I got initially out of college was that of a research assistant. And I did that for about 2 days until my supervisor said, "We have this position. It's a database administrator. Will you step in?" Sure, I'll step in. Kristina was curious, was open to anything at that time. And I had no idea what a database administrator was. This organization really helped me understand what a database administrator was, sent me to get certified and being a database administrator, and then later on, a software developer. And so I actually spent 20 years in software development, engineering, and cyber. Loved the career, had no idea that I would go in that direction.
But I'm glad she did. And as you can see, her curiosity is what drives her to constantly not only learn about industries, but also understand her people and how they show up. Her curiosity is also what drove her to understand how she could improve and how she shows up as herself, as well as in respect to differences. Early in her career, she looks back at how someone shared crucial advice about how she was engaging people who were different than her, that she didn't realize she was doing.
I remember my first assessment. First of all, I didn't know what an assessment was and saw this feedback that was given to me. And one of the feedback that I got was that I can be, I forget the word, I wish I knew, it was more like agitated with people who are slower in thought than I am. I was like, what is that? And so I remember going to my supervisor at the time and just asking the question. And from that, I realized how important feedback was, but more importantly, how a supervisor, manager, or however you want to create that partnership, the communication is so key and important. And that I carried for every position that I ever had, and making sure that whenever I started working with someone new and I was reporting to them, building that rapport and having those conversations, and then vice versa. So that was key to pivots. And also, before I made decisions and actually acted on them, I would get feedback from people. And so people were not surprised if I resigned or if I moved somewhere else. They were always part of it. And I thought that was, for me, a big differentiator.
In other words, Kristina was always mindful of the relationship she was building. Sometimes asking for feedback could make us feel we are not good enough. Sometimes sharing our transition questions and thoughts could make us feel like we are asking for permission. And that's why I love what Kristina shared here. It doesn't have to be like that. Feedback shared with care is key to how we grow, and building those relationships early on in every role we enter or join is the key to building trust that encourages us to show up as our full selves. This is why when I asked what is important to build trust, in addition to modeling flexibility and permission for others to show up as their full selves, she speaks about the importance of having a safe room to have shared feedback both ways.
We reflect on things that went well, and we reflect on things that could have been done better. And I think once you get into a pattern of that, you build trust. And once you build trust, you know that you can share information. Now, that's one piece. The other piece is just from a cultural perspective. You know, there are people who grew up in households that feedback was natural. And there are some people that it wasn't. And we've got to understand where people are. And I think that's where it's important for individuals to say, either I don't feel comfortable with this or I do. I often start with a question, are you okay if I share this? Or might it be okay if I share this with you? And sometimes people say yes, sometimes people say no. And then I respect where people are. But I think creating a culture of feedback and then being aware of how people want to receive it. Some people like it in writing. Some people are okay with you calling them right after a meeting and saying, hey, can I share this with you? Some people want it more informally than formally. And so those are things that people do need to think about. It's hard. Feedback is, bad feedback is not good. Good feedback is the validation that we typically need.
This is so key. Whether it's feedback or the way we work, we should ask and think about how others feel about it. Perhaps we're unconsciously discouraging other team members to show their full selves because we haven't checked in and asked, hey, how would you like to work best? Speaking of which, how can we do a better job seeing our colleagues then as our full selves? As you mentioned earlier, to encourage others on how to bring their full selves, we have to remember who they are beyond the job title, and as a full being with families and life outside of work. And I feel the pandemic has in a way made it hard for some of the females and mothers to show up fully to work, as they had to choose either career or family, as most workplaces are not making space for both. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to speak from my perspective and then I'll do observations, is that even before this, I think as a mom, a wife, just a woman, I always felt like I was choosing. And in my mind, it was always, who am I going to disappoint today? Right. And I know that's such a glass half empty way of thinking about it, but that's how I lived for quite some time. And I think when I was an entrepreneur, I realized actually you have choices and you can create opportunity in most cases. Not everyone can do that, but when you're privileged to do so, I encourage people to take advantage of that. Part of that is asking and telling the people that you're working with what you need. I think some people assume that rules are written down and you can't change that. And I would say right now is the best time. If you love what you're doing, where you're working, but something's not quite right, first have that conversation. What I've noticed as a parent over COVID, I have 2 kids, 14 and 13, and it was really interesting to get to know them as kids. Because what we do is we drop them off at school or they walk to school, and then we don't see them until later in the day. And then we're rushing them to soccer and gymnastics and lacrosse and all of these things. And then we may have dinner rushed and they go to bed. It was really interesting to see them in their downtime, how they're learning and how they're responding to their teachers online, to hear the questions that they're asking during the day, because they're not talking to their friends, they're talking to us, which was really interesting. And I gained an appreciation for my kids as people. And I've shared this before. My daughter had a really hard time at the beginning of COVID. And she was 12 at the time, turning 13. We had to cancel her 13th birthday. Well, not her birthday, but celebrating with her friends. And then she struggled initially in the beginning with being in remote class. And we learned that she was a very social learner. And so once we figured out what she needed, we allowed her to FaceTime her friends while being on camera in school. People can judge us, that's fine, but we had to realize what worked for her. My son, on the other hand, excelled. He was not distracted. He's a very operationally tight kid, and he loved that we're online here at this time, we're off this time, I get to go outside at this time, and he excelled. And so that has caused us to look at what's the right learning environment for our kids and what makes sense for us now. I also observed I have several friends who are single parents, and one of my friends one day just said, work is now in my home and my home comes first. And so we start seeing a lot of choices that particularly moms and dads, single dads as well are going through this, or just parents in general, having to make choices because of uncertainty. And the first job of a parent is to protect your child and make sure that your child is okay. And so we've got to alter and be mindful of laws and rules and regulations and flexibility that we're given.
Thank you, Kristina, for this thoughtful sharing and reflection. Yes, in other words, what encourages others to bring their full selves is remembering to see them as their full selves. Not just in their work title or task, but as a human being. And those actions may mean you taking a moment to ask about each other's family, how they are actually doing, listening for how they express themselves. At times, we may not be ready to share. Respect those boundaries. Simply asking how they are really doing over and over again is not the way to go about it. And no, just saying that your company culture is authenticity isn't the way to go about it. And most importantly, perhaps, is that we have to all each own up to learning about ourselves what we really want.
There are those moments, and hopefully you start to feel it, where I'm becoming resentful, right? I'm becoming resentful about what's being asked of me. I'm annoyed with this person that didn't quite get what I wanted, out of the job. And honestly, for me, it was a lot of reflection, is that I was seeking things from the job that aren't part of the job description. I was seeking these things of, what can the university do for me? What can my organization do for me? Why aren't they doing this, right? That's not their responsibility. And when I started realizing that I needed to take a risk, I sought out guidance from mentors. And honestly, most of those that didn't work in the education field, most of them were artists or songwriters that I am connected to. And the job was wonderful. The next person that's going to be in that job is going to be thrilled. But there was something about me about coming into my 40s where things started to unravel a little bit, where I see a clock that's ticking, and I could have easily been in that job maybe for another 10 years. And it would have been wonderful, and I feel very blessed. But the time was now, and honestly, the time was probably a year ago. But the pandemic and everything that happened, I wanted to see certain things through. But there's no such thing as a good time to quit a job. There's no such thing as a good moment in time where everything's going to be perfect. There's no such thing as a great job transition. None of that exists. You can do the best to help your colleagues. You can do your best by having authentic and real conversations, emotional conversations with your boss. And, mine, I was very fortunate, was so supportive, understood, and told me these aren't meant as forever jobs. And there were a lot of really wonderful nuggets that she shared with me, but the time was now to kind of make this choice and transition. And for once in my life, without a full-blown plan, I needed to quit to allow myself the space to unravel, to have the dark moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just ruined my career. What in the world did I do? Oh my gosh, you're such an idiot. Why are you doing this? To this point where every single day that I'm in the space and allowing myself to say yes, I had to quit and say no to that job to kind of come up with, what is that Shonda Rhimes book, which I think is really good, like that power of yes. I'm not Shonda Rhimes, but I think that, for me, I was coming from a place of no. And the most important thing at that job is that I was saying no to what I wanted.
No matter how much this workplace supported him, he needed to leave to do more of what he wanted to do fully. For Kristina, it meant stepping into her role at JFF to do more of the impact she wanted to create. The key is, we all have to look back at ourselves and really ask, what is the full self I want to bring into life and work, and what do I want and need more support? As you can hear, neither steps were easy, but I'm so glad Kristina and Mike have taken those steps. They're not only happier at what they do, but their happiness and joy are making other people around them happy and encouraged too. So yes, bringing our full selves to work, it's not just the organization's responsibility. It's not just my manager's responsibility. It starts with me. Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And how can I encourage others to show up as well? And if you're listening as a leader today, that impact is even greater. You never know who will step out of that meeting and say, hey, I can't believe you said that. I didn't know I could do that too. Thank you so much again for joining us at Dear Workplace. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This is your host, Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox. Thank you, Kristina and Mike, for sharing your story and wisdom with us today. Please take a moment to follow and learn more about their journey. I put the links in the show notes. Next week, I'm eager to dive deeper into how indeed can we stay connected and build trust when everything is online still. Yes, still. Now that it's been 2 years, we're raising new questions. And I wonder, what are some questions we should be asking and diving deeper into as we think about connectivity and trust? Curious to learn more? Join us next week at Dear Workplace. Send any questions at info@innovatorsbox.com or dearworkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon again.
Hi, I'm Kelly, a creative intern at InnovatorsBox, and I hope you're enjoying Dear Workplace. Right now, I'm finishing up my last semester at Berklee College of Music, and I'm so excited to live out this season's lessons in my impending music business journey. Wish me luck! This show is brought together by our awesome team, Sam Lemmert on audio engineering and editing, me on marketing, Akriti Pandey on website, Monica Escobar on branding, Leah Orsini on social media graphics, Sarah Piandelita and Flor on project assistance, and Luke Helder on music. And of course, Dear Workplace is hosted and directed by Monica Kang, founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox. To continue the conversation of reimagining the workplace, visit us at innovatorsbox.com. Also, Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share. We would love to hear what you enjoy and what I can convince Monica to talk about in our next episodes. See you next week.